Well, welcome to another episode of our series on the architecture of reality. I have missed a few days. We had a leak in the basement into my daughter's room, which means my daughter is sleeping in my son's room, which means my son is sleeping in my office. So I don't have early mornings to record at the moment. So I'm recording on my phone in the classroom where I teach apologetics to high school seniors, and we'll see how this works. See if it does the trick. And I was talking to somebody recently, and they were wondering why I would spend a bunch of time studying the cosmology of an ancient people that nobody believes matches with reality anymore. Nobody believes is useful anymore because our science isn't based on it anymore. And why is it that I would spend a bunch of time studying that? And it made me think of a quote from C.S. Lewis. It's in The Abolition of Man, I'm pretty sure. And he says, he's talking about why the liberal arts education is important. The liberal arts education, meaning you're studying the arts of thought, the arts of reasoning, the arts of language, as well as the mathematical arts. And in studying those things, you learn how to think with different kinds of reasoning. Algebraic reasoning is different than geometric reasoning, is different than reasoning from symbolic logic, or reasoning from, geometry and symbolic logic are the same, but reasoning from the normal kind of logic and rhetoric, and after listening through the Senate interview Pete Hegseth yesterday, I thought, well, that's why we study rhetoric and logic, because man, we've got senators making decisions for us that don't know how to put together an argument, don't know how to avoid just basic logical fallacies, and sometimes they don't even know. It's their job to ask a question, but they don't even know how to do that. And it was just embarrassing to think there are states that sent these people to make legal decisions for them, and you think, oh, boy, do we need a return of the liberal arts. But what we tend to focus on is vocational training. And the reason that seems reasonable, the reason that seems just at the gut level, like, well, education is supposed to prepare us for the workforce. The reason we think that is because of our cosmology. The view of the world that we have is that it's a big economic machine, and I've got to find my place in it. And that means that I need to be trained to be a cog in that machine. And C.S. Lewis, about vocational training, he says, vocational training, on the other hand, prepares the pupil not for leisure, which leisure is freedom of time, but it's also freedom of mind, the freedom to be able to stop, to think, to question, freedom to be able to look at things from multiple perspectives, right? And that takes practice. It takes a certain amount of knowledge. And he says, vocational training vocational training prepares the pupil not for leisure, but for work. It aims at making not a good man, but a good banker, a good electrician, a good scavenger, or a good surgeon. You see at once that education is essentially for free men, and vocational training for slaves. That is how they were distributed in the old unequal societies. The poor man's son was apprenticed to a trade. The rich man's son went to Eton and Oxford and then made the grand tour. Right? He's just talking about a mindset that says, what are my kids for? In another place, he says the difference between the old and new education being, in a word, the old was a kind of propagation, men transmitting manhood to men. The new is merely propaganda, right? And so now what you've got is the left and the right disagreeing on what kind of machine this is, right? The right says it's an economic machine. The left says it's a political machine, and the right says, just get out of my way, let me do my work, let me be a part of this economic machine, make my money. And the left says, hey, your economics needs to be in service to this political machine, and it's about, but they both agree that it's a machine, and that we are trying to find our place in that machine. And the older cosmology says, no, each person is a microcosm of the universe. Each person is a universe in and of themselves. They're the image of God, and their identity is secure not because they find their place in the machine of society, but instead they receive an identity as the image of God from the people around them, from their relationships, from their relation to the world, because God is triune, that he is fundamentally, his relationality, the Father is the Father because he has a Son, the Son is the Son because he has a Father, the Spirit is sent by the Father, sent by the Son, received from the Son by the Father, received from the Father by the Son, right? That the relationships are fundamentally and internally a part of their identity, and that's the reason that finding a fitting place helps us understand our identity, because God made us the kind of creature that can't see themselves, or we can only. We look out of our eyes, but we see ourselves in other people's eyes in relationship, and we really learn and understand who we are. The freedom to do that with leisure of mind, if you're looking for a book about leisure, Devin O'Donnell wrote a great book about leisure that's really helpful in understanding what leisure meant before we became obsessed with economics as a way of giving ourselves an identity, but that leisure of mind that says, well, here's my assumptions, or here's how we believe the world works, or here's the metaphor system that we're using, and then to use it, but use it understanding that I'm interacting with the world by means of a shared metaphor system, and that kind of leisure of mind that comes with studying the shared metaphor systems of previous peoples, the shared metaphor systems of other peoples, really does give us the ability to be free, even in the midst of work, right? Working as a teacher, working as a plumber, working doing sheetrock, working as a delivery driver, laying wire, working in a corporate environment, even sitting in a cubicle. A well-educated man can remain free because he has the leisure of mind to understand that it could be otherwise, right? To understand that and that ability to imagine that it could be otherwise is part of what makes it possible for us to change the world around us. So one of the reasons that I've found for studying language roots, the history of language, the history of cosmology, the history of metaphysics, what's so helpful is I stop being bound by the assumptions of my age, enslaved by the assumptions of my age, and propaganda becomes clear and obvious, right? Because we're not just, the problem with propaganda is not that they get to do it and we don't, right? A lot of times we think, the problem with government propaganda is who's in charge of the government. But the reality is the problem with government propaganda, or government by advertising, as I've heard it called um, by someone. It may have been C.S. Lewis that said it, government by advertising, which I think is a really good description of the modern propaganda state. The problem with that is the assumption of what kind of creature the government believes it's ruling, right, or leading. Where we don't use the word rule anymore, we use the word lead, which is, I think, dehumanizing. Versus, I would rather be ruled by a righteous person than led by a bureaucrat. And but that's because a bureaucrat doesn't want you, or is threatened by leisure of mind. Threatened if you look at the DMV and you say, it could be otherwise. There'd be a better way to do this. I mean, that threatens a bureaucrat, whereas a ruler can take in the advice of those he rules. I remember reading in elementary school. I read a lot of King Arthur, and what I remember just thinking, oh, I just would love to have a queen. It'd be amazing to serve a queen. That there isn't anything that you expect to get from them. You just get to show honor, right? And thinking how romantic in the small r sense of the word, the old sense of the word. That might be, maybe that's the capital R sense of the word, but how just the idea of a personal ruler. But now we're ruled by bureaucrats. Well, a bureaucrat is threatened by leisure of mind, because the ability to think it could be otherwise threatens the whole system, because the system is designed to be mechanistic. A free radical in a machine is a bad thing, right? You don't want things off course or thinking differently. So studying cosmology and metaphysics, studying other ways of doing things, broadening and having that liberal arts education that learns to think with different modes of reasoning. You think with linguistic modes of reasoning, logic, rhetoric, and thinking algebraic, thinking mathematical, with mathematical modes of reasoning, algebraic modes of reasoning, geometric, logical modes of reasoning, thinking in terms of effective rhetoric being joined to righteous character. Those sorts of studies in the liberal arts, they make us a threat. I think in a good way. They make us a threat to a mechanistic world, but they also give us freedom, even in the midst of being expected to be a slave.